Well, howdy, folks. Welcome back to another episode of the Texas SignalCast. I'm your host, Joe Desotel, and I'm here with my co-host, Jessica Montoya Coggins. Hello, Jessica.
Hey, Joe. Hey, guys.
Yeah, so we're back again to talk about the happenings in Texas politics. We got some Democratic news this time. Beto is making his way around the state. You were able to visit, I think, one of those stops along the way. We've got progressive victories from the last election that just took place. A lot of GOP elected officials on the move, and Paxton under investigation again. Surprise, surprise. So let's take it from the top. First of all, I think one of the bigger announcements that took place, there were so many over the past week, but one of the bigger ones was that the TDP is launching a voter registration program with the idea to register 2 million new voters. So I don't know if you saw this announcement, but there were, it was a pretty big announcement. They had a lot of elected officials, even members of Congress, at the press conference to really promote all the efforts that they're going to be making around registering new voters. And I think part of the issue why they're focusing on this so much, other than the pure numbers, Republicans actually out-registered voters in the last cycle, which was a huge disappointment for Democrats. But also because the redistricting census data has not come back yet, and folks don't know where they're going to be running and what districts or what they're going to look like. One of the things that we can do in terms of outreach is register voters, because no matter how the lines are drawn, we know we need more voters. So what are your thoughts?
We do. And, registering voters is no easy undertaking. I know when I moved back to Texas, I was very shocked when I found that there wasn't automatic voter registration. Texas is one of just a handful of states for that. And then when I even learned further that you cannot just like simply go, if I just wanted to register a voter, I need to become a deputy voter registrar, and I need to do that in every county. A couple of months ago, I was on a podcast with some folks. Can we please talk? And so the hosts were from New York. And so when I was sort of walking them through this, they were just shocked because, in most states, registering to vote takes about 3 minutes. But Texas is not like that. So I think this was a really, really big announcement. Yes, you're right. Had a lot of folks on hand for that. Rafael Anchia, Veronica Escobar, I think Nicole Collier, like a lot of our, great elected officials here. And this is going to be a huge, huge priority, especially if we do see voter suppression laws enacted, specifically SB 7. And it was very welcome news.
Yeah, and you mentioned how hard it is to register in Texas, all the hoops you have to jump through to even register other people. It is, worth mentioning that one of the efforts Republicans were trying to do was to actually make this even harder because, we're innovative in the sense that we have a new problem, so we have to find a workaround and another way to make it easier for people to register. So some of the things that have happened as they make registering harder is getting as close as we can to online voter registration. We still don't even have that technically, which is very benign. It's literally like just fill the form out and then you get put on the rolls, and you still have to show up with an ID and all that stuff and prove who you are, but they won't even let us do that. And so what the smart folks in ad campaign tech and stuff have been doing is figuring out a way to send pre-filled registration cards to people so that all they have to do is sign it and send it back and ban the registered to vote. And I heard that one of the things that they were trying to do in the worse version of SB 7 that they tried to push and we ultimately killed and they will probably bring back is to eliminate that ability for us to even send pre-filled. So they know that every step of the way that they can put a hurdle there, it's going to make it harder for us to hit that goal.
Yeah, pre-fill. I mean, so registering, you have to print something out. Very few people own printers. You also have to find postage. That's a whole other thing. It's getting even more expensive actually in August. So yeah, a lot of the organizations that we talked about, folks like Move Texas, this is what they've been doing. And it was also further hindered, we're still in the coronavirus pandemic, but that was a whole other sort of obstacle on this.
Mm-hmm.
It is. I was glad to see that the news about this endeavor. At the same time, it is still a little disheartening to know that we're stuck in this state where, I think in California, you can pre-register when you go to the DMV for your driver's license. And I know plenty of states are like that too. It seems like a really no-brainer thing to do, but for our state,
right. There are things that the private sector could do as well. I think that could be really helpful. For instance, this is something could probably happen through the apartment association, but if you're a new tenant, there's no reason why a change of address voter registration form shouldn't be included in your welcome packet if you're a new tenant in an apartment. So there are things that we can do outside of the government to just continue to ease this, because a lot of apartment complexes do not like folks coming in and canvassing, right? So there are things that we can do to sort of satisfy both sides and just make it a little bit easier for people to stay engaged and participate in their government. And so, one person that we've been following around, certainly, who is very interested in this is our one Beto O'Rourke, who is on a tour right now of at least 22 cities across the state in sort of promotion of voting rights. So I think you had the pleasure of going to one of these. Can you tell us what you saw and how that turned out?
Yes. So a few nights ago, I was at Paul Quinn College. This is in South Dallas. So Beto was there. It was actually my first time sort of being in a larger crowd. So I regret to inform people I am extremely awkward. I saw a lot of people I hadn't seen, and there was hugs and shaking hands, and I was kind of like, wait, what is this? What is this stuff again?
Yeah.
But yes, so Beto was there. Michael Sorrell, Dr. Michael Sorrell, the president of Paul Quinn College, welcomed him. And then the first question from the audience was obviously whether or not he was going to run for governor. But Beto, he's very focused on democracy and the fight against voter suppression. So to that end, there were several members, House Democrat members that were there. U.S. Congresswoman Eddie Bernice Johnson was there as well. But he introduced Toni Rose, who represents the district where Paul Quinn College is located. She was very effusive for her praise for Jessica Gonzalez, who was also there, vice chair of the elections committee. And they kind of walked through just what had to happen for the walkout to occur. Jasmine Crockett was there, who we've talked about her a lot. It's actually my first time actually getting to see her in person, so that was exciting. Cool. But she, very much was rallying the crowd. She reminded folks too that when she won in a runoff, it was only by 90 votes. So when people say like every vote matters, it really does. There's a lot of races where, just one vote can make a difference. And so that was, Beto, he, is very, very, his Beto self. And it was very interesting to see. It was a good number of people that were there. I heard a fair number of folks speaking Spanish. It looks like a very, what we want our party to look like. It was
like the state of Texas, right?
Like the state of Texas.
And
a little different than I think some of the rallies you might see from our contemporaries over at the Republican side.
Yeah, I mean, and so one of the things that obviously this is really great to see. We want him to continue to do that because no matter where he goes, he brings crowds and enthusiasm and momentum. And for the lack of infrastructure we have, that star power is so meaningful, and it will be in terms of the hopes that people have for the party, but also the ability to raise the money, get the awareness. And like you said, there were other high-ranking elected officials there who it would be very difficult for any other candidate running around the state to bring that kind of other star power there as well. And a lot of these folks like EBJ, you mentioned, she doesn't have to campaign ever, right? Like that's not something she has to do. So if it takes Beto to go up, to her part of the state to bring, her out. I'm obviously not picking on her. I'm just saying that she's in a very safe district. That's been part of the problem with the way the state has been gerrymandered. Democrats are put in very safe districts, although very few, and they're almost disincentivized to really campaign to expand and try to get a majority, because essentially their place in the legislature or the committees they serve on or the bills that they really care about are hang in the balance of sometimes how much they go and try to support other Democrats. And I know for a fact that there were Democrats who faced that kind of retribution for going out and campaigning against incumbent Republicans on behalf of Democrats who are in their own party. And there were Republicans who were offended that Democrats on the other side would go and campaign for another Democrat to replace them. But we're never going to get the majority again. We're never going to be able to pass policy if we aren't able to do that. And so it's really good to see him, whether he runs or not. Of course, I hope that he does run, but there are going to be obviously issues that he's going to have to get over, and that's just going to be par for any Democrat. So I think from what I can tell, there are people waiting to see what he does, but for the most part, it seems like everybody is on hold, at least for that position, until they find out what his
Yeah.
decision is.
At the event in Dallas, Eddie Bernice Johnson essentially sort of pre-endorsed Beto, and that sort of went for pretty much all the state representatives that were there.
Yeah.
But for folks who are interested, he is on this 22 city tour, and I believe they're even adding places. So in addition to being in Dallas, he was also in Waxahachie. That's a city of about less than 40,000. They don't often get folks like Beto, so it was great to hear. I talked with the woman who introduced him, and she was very it was just like very she said like it was almost hard for her to put into words like how appreciative people were, and that they really responded to this. So this is, I think, a very good thing that he's doing, and he's also actually putting in the work too. He became a VDR in both Dallas County and Ellis County, so he registered a voter actually right before the event in Dallas. Her name was Esperanza, which he said, which I believe means hope in Spanish. So he said that was a
sign,
maybe a sign of good things to come.
Yeah, I like that. It's interesting that you mentioned that, because as we talked about the TDP's goal to register 2 million voters, one of the biggest issues I know that they're concerned about is making sure that the people they register are actually Democrats. And this is, I think, looking back on it, this is one of the things that they want to improve, because if we go out and register voters, for instance, if we just assume a Black person is going to vote Democrat because 90% of the people Black people who vote Democrat, that seem like a safe assumption, but if this person is not voting, potentially maybe it's because they're not a Democrat. And so we can't necessarily just assume based on race and things like that people are going to vote with us. We of course saw that in South Texas. We saw that in 2020 with the certain counties flipping to Trump in South Texas, which was a surprise to many Democrats, some not as big of a surprise to other Democrats who have been watching this closely. Fortunately, yes, we lost Hispanics, at least our progress with them in South Florida, in South Texas. We were able to make up some of those gains in the suburbs, which is where Beto's been spending a lot of his time. And that kind of thing has been very helpful to us to do. But, we're going to have to, make sure that we are communicating with people and sharing our values and not just registering them to vote. I talked to a guy yesterday who spent a lot of time knocking on doors for Beto in 2018. And he told me, and he's a white guy, and he was just saying, I would go to minority neighborhoods, knock on a door, a young Black person would answer the phone and say, you know what, every 2 years, somebody like you come knock on my door, you want my vote, but I don't even know what's happened in the last 2 years that you've done for me. That's a frustrating thing to hear, because it's hard, and it plays on a lot of what Republicans really try to get people to believe about government, that it's inept and it serves no purpose but to take your money and your freedoms and things like that. So we have to continue to communicate. And we talked about a year-round organizing model that I think Democrats now realize that we have to do. It has to be outside of the major cities as well. We have to do organizing year round. And this has been a successful thing we've done in Travis County, but the things we organize around in Travis County may not be what they organize around in other cities. And so year round in Travis County, when I was comms director there, we would make sure we had a quarterly event in off election years where we would bring in the police chief and we would talk to the police chief about policing and really difficult issues, not like, oh, hey, come shake hands and take pictures with your police chief. Like, we put them on the spot. We asked them tough questions. We did the same to other elected officials and give people an opportunity and a platform to understand how government affects their daily lives and how they can be a part of it and make the changes they want to see. And when the Democratic Party is the one facilitating that, then you build a long-term relationship with people and there's more skin in the game for them. And so this is a model we have to export around the state. And it may not be the same issue, but the model is good. And so we're going to have to do that. And so, we did have an op-ed on texassignal.com from one of the candidates who lost their race in 2020, Clayton Tucker, running in a very gerrymandered district, but he did provide some good insights, and he's a very positive person, I can tell you that, but on some victories that progressives had. And, we talk about the loss that we had in South Texas, which got a outsized attention compared to the gains that we made in other places, because it was making national news that this mayor, Republicans flipped the mayor seat of McAllen, Texas. But when I talked to people from South Texas, they told me the previous mayor of the last 10 years was very conservative. So, but Republicans' ability to spin this into victories for themselves is something they do much better than Democrats, they'll tell you.
They do. I noticed that the day, I was very sad that Deborah Peoples lost the runoff election for mayor of Fort Worth. She's just a friend of mine. It was on my podcast. But like in the aftermath, it seemed like all the focus was on the Fort Worth race and then that race in McAllen. And that gives you just a little portion of the story. So yes, Clayton, who is the Texas state director for Our Revolution, the group that's sort of aligned with Bernie Sanders' campaign. He sort of listed all of the victories that progressives had. So speaking of Fort Worth, actually the city council flipped. So now for the first time in a really long time, Democrats hold a majority on that, 5 out of the 9 seats. 2 incumbents lost, one including a very conservative, I think he was kind of even like the mayor pro tem. They lost to some really bona fide progressives. Grand Prairie, a large city outside of Dallas, elected a new progressive, and Clayton sort of walked through also what happened in San Antonio. I had to kind of fact check this one thing because I didn't believe it, but there, Jalen McKee Rodriguez, who was elected in San Antonio, he is now the first openly gay Black man elected to office. I read that and I was like, wait, that can't be true. And it turns out that was true.
The asterisk is always the openly gay part, right? Like, because that's that's so he may not be the first gay Black person elected, but yeah. And so, I mean, because honestly, like, I'll tell you, like, there are a lot of rumors around in the Texas Capitol about Republicans who are not openly gay. So we obviously don't out people and things like that, because that has to be on their own terms and it's their privacy. But it is frustrating, the hypocritical nature of the way that they treat the issue and treat people, and are afraid of their own party and their own voters. So that is amazing. I saw that too, and I was kind of blown away by that in a state of 30 million people, that was the first one ever. And your point can't be made enough about how big it is that we've essentially flipped the Fort Worth City Council, because I saw the New York Times article and it was all about that South Texas mayor in McAllen. I'm like, we just flipped the biggest.
Fort Worth is the 12th largest city in the country. It is larger than Atlanta, Denver,
absolutely,
Seattle.
And it was the last conservative one. It was the last major city in America that essentially voted conservative, and we flipped it. And it used to be the bellwether county. It's in Tarrant County. It was the bellwether county for statewide elections in Texas, D versus R, to the half of a percentage point, you would see the Tarrant County D versus R compared to the statewide D versus R. And slowly we've chipped away at it. And
And
Biden,
Deborah Peoples, for her mayoral run, she got 47%
it's
of the vote. And
close.
I can't emphasize enough. Republicans went to the mat for Millennial Maddie, who was running. I mean, there was just an onslaught of ads. And, you know, because I think that they were very afraid of losing that seat, and that generating the headlines for them about, you know, the suburban erosion or city erosion, you know, for Fort Worth.
Mm-hmm.
But so that is one thing I did want to point out.
Absolutely. And so we've got to do a better job of promoting our wins. And I mean, the global I mean, obviously, we're giving a platform to this on the Signal, but other places and Democrats at large, like, we've got to be proud of the victories that we've gotten, because that's going to help set us up to actually pass good policy, and then, you know, raise the profile of some of these folks, as you've been doing with your podcast as well. And so, you know, there are, with that, GOP folks also on the move here. And so the fact that this mayor's race in Fort Worth was even an open seat is because Mayor Betsy Price basically said she wasn't, either she was termed out or she wasn't running again.
She was turned out, yeah.
But it was just announced, as far as I saw today, that she is going to be running for Tarrant County judge. And so she hasn't officially announced it, but she said she is running a soft launch campaign and will make an official announcement very soon. So, you know, they're still making plays. They won't give up, obviously. So we know her as a Republican, even if she isn't a necessarily hardcore right-wing Republican. To my knowledge, she's always been much more of a business-oriented traditional Republican, which is certainly better than the Louis Gohmert types that we're kind of see take over the party these days. But
I don't know. You know,
am I wrong? Tell
really,
me. Tell me.
my mind was really spinning when he was asking the questions about whether we could change the orbit of the moon. So, you know, in some ways, that who would even think that?
I mean, isn't that why we have a Space Force now? Like, so yeah, and so there are some other GOP folks on the move. Senator Don Buckingham from basically, I think it's Senate District 25, and she has announced that she is going to run for land commissioner, which is going to be vacated by George P. Bush, who is challenging Ken Paxton. And so it's like the Republicans themselves, they kind of see the ship starting to shake. They don't know if it's going to sink or not, but they're definitely ready for the shakeup. And the ones who have been sitting, waiting for their turn, are getting anxious, and they see the tide changing, and they think probably this may be our last chance. If I want to run for that statewide office, I better do it now, which is a good thing for Democrats, because it both sends a signal that we're more competitive, but it also gets rid of some of these folks, right, with the high name ID. Because if the high name ID start voting or running against each other, that removes them from their previous position and now opens up more seats for Democrats to run in, like we saw with Peoples. So this is a good sign, I think, ultimately for us. It's kind of like when you see I would say the peroxide, like cleaning out the wound. He's just like, there's a lot of stuff going on there, but it's actually a sign of better things to come. So who else? Sid Miller, we've talked many times about him and what he's going to do. He recently said, as in the last couple of days or so, that the endorsement by Trump of Abbott is not necessarily deterring him for a run again challenging Abbott. My goodness, can you imagine? We're going to get rid of him one way or another. Like, either he's going to run against Abbott, or we have not been able to beat him ourselves. But if Republicans are beating each other, I'll take that. Especially this guy. He's one of the worst.
Yes, and Kim Olson gave him as did a lot of the Democrats who ran in 2018. That was a good challenge. So hopefully that we'll find someone well equipped to take on that role for us.
Yeah, for ag commissioner, it's a really important role. I mean, lunches in schools and things like that. They actually have quite a bit of power that happens from his office, and so The other interesting one I saw that popped up was Ellen Troxclair, who is the Republican who is running to replace Don Buckingham for Senate. She was a conservative member of the Austin City Council. And it's so funny because you mentioned that Jasmine Crockett only won by 40 votes or so. Well, Ellen Troxclair is now this sort of what they like to say rising star in the Republican Party who won her seat by only 46 votes
Oh, wow.
when she ran for Austin City Council. I know that because my wife was the field director for the guy who challenged her. But she's probably gritting her teeth right now at me. But so, she won by 46 votes. And had she not won, she may have disappeared into obscurity. But she won by 46 votes. And now she's going to be a senator. Like that is, you say every vote counts and it does, but that is the huge sort of exponential difference that just a couple of votes can make. So
Right. Well, I mean, both Paxton and Sid Miller, I think, were actually underdogs maybe when they
mhm.
first ran for their respective positions. So that also sort of shows just a lot of this can be very very almost whimsical. It's just like, all right, this is
Yeah, absolutely. And you see why they're fighting so hard to prevent people from voting. And it's just because of this. And so you mentioned Paxton. Here we go again.
here we
He
go again.
is now under investigation by the Texas bar. So just add it to the list,
I don't. I
FBI.
have to. I was going to fact check this. Has there ever been a state's attorney general who has been disbarred while they were serving in office? I I'm gonna have to do some research on that. Yeah, when the news broke yesterday, my father is a lawyer, so he's always the person that I like turn towards when I have to like have legal questions. So I was like running up to his office, and he when I have this look in my eye, he always knows it's like, okay, it's either Ken Paxton or one of the Real Housewives. So something happened, and then I asked him, but this is very serious. So initially, I believe what happened is this complaint wasn't taken up, and then sort of the overseers board of the state bar did decide to look into this. And so this also stems from the Supreme Court case, the Supreme Court challenge that Paxton
Mhm.
tried when he tried to throw out the votes of four states that had voted for Joe Biden.
hmm Yeah, and it's interesting because I don't think he helped his case as far as this concern when he recently told some right-wing news station that Trump
Oh,
would not have
he was on Steve Bannon's podcast.
Steve Bannon. Oh my God, it's worse than I thought. So, he said on that program that Trump would not have won Texas if it wasn't for his actions to prevent people from voting by mail. I mean, it's not exactly the same thing, but it is the same thing. We're talking about the 2020 election. So he's talking about his efforts before the election. What they're looking into now is his efforts after the election. But I really feel like it paints a narrative and a picture of his intent. Of course, I'm not a lawyer, so I'm just stating what I feel is like the obvious. That absolutely, he's so proud of the fact that he tried to overturn a legitimate election.
I would actually think that Donald Trump would have a lot of problems with Ken Paxton claiming
A
that
hundred percent.
that it was him that actually won
I
the state of Texas.
absolutely.
This is something that that Representative Jasmine Crockett brings up a lot. Is you go back to 2012, Barack Obama lost this state by what 18 points or something, and so then 2016 it's single digits, nine points that Trump won, and then now it's a little less than six. So it's
hmm
just that it's getting closer and closer.
Yeah.
Um, and as we've talked a lot about, that Republicans clearly feel that way too.
Yeah. And I 110% agree with you that if you're looking for that Trump endorsement, taking credit for his wins doesn't seem like the way to do it. It seems like he actually gets quite offended when people try to take credit. Remember, he fired Scaramucci after 11 days because he was basically stealing the show. And he's done that before, with other folks who he felt were grifting off of his personal sort of star power. He
Well,
doesn't
Steve,
mind,
Steve Bannon was kind of like that too, wasn't he? Was
yeah, that's
in
right.
the circle, and then he was booted out.
Yeah, absolutely.
Although I guess he did give him a pardon, so that he did earn that.
And there he is, still in the
That
background.
occurred in Texas. It was a grift about the build the wall.
Mm-hmm. That's right. That's right. The good news about a lot of these pardons is some of the alleged crimes that were committed are also state crimes or other crimes that fall under other jurisdictions, and Trump does not have the ability to pardon them for crimes that are not federal crimes.
Oh,
So,
if we actually had a good state attorney general, that whole enterprise that Bannon and his partners undertook, they really embezzled people out of money for a organization that was supposed to build the wall.
mhm,
And it was just kind of a grift for them. I mean,
yeah,
he purchased I think he was actually arrested on a yacht that he had purchased, or a boat that he had purchased.
he probably tried to claim he was in international waters or something, and just, I mean, these guys are, there's nothing too low, no place too low for them. But
Mhm.
so you did actually get to speak with another Paxton, which is a much brighter story here. A young woman who was the valedictorian, I believe, of her high school in Dallas, which I don't know. It's not the high school where my wife went, but it's in her neighborhood. It would have been her neighborhood high school. A Lake Highlands, or
Yes, it's Lake Highlands.
okay. You actually talked to her. Can you tell us about that?
Sure. So for folks who may have seen this, it went very viral on the internet. Paxton Smith gave a commencement speech at Lake Highlands High School, where she graduated, and she switched out the speech. So she actually spoke about the abortion ban that Governor Abbott recently signed. It's a very poignant speech, and I think she really articulated what a lot of Texans feel about how scary this legislation is and how much it is going to impact the state. So that whole speech went extremely viral, and I know that in the days afterwards, she was everywhere. She was on CNN, she was on MSNBC, a lot of our local stations here in Dallas. So I was very excited to talk with her, and I do have to shout out our intern Bella, who facilitated that, because it was no small feat.
Yeah.
But yes, so I talked with Paxton, and it sounds like she's also going to continue her trajectory into social activism. So before we talked over the weekend, she was in Austin. There was a rally for abortion rights. It was actually organized by a 12-year-old.
Wow.
So Paxton, was really effusive for her praise for that organizer. And I think this goes to show that the younger generation is really paying attention to what is happening. And I think this is maybe something that Republicans in Texas, I was just trying to imagine the reaction from folks like Abbott or Patrick, that, and actually even maybe the Richardson ISD, where Lake Highlands is, that this has generated so much. It has been such a huge media sensation. So
Hmm.
I was really grateful to talk with her. She'll be actually up in your neck of the woods. So she will be a first year at the University of Texas at Arlington, and she doesn't know what kind of what capacity yet, but she does plan to continue social activism.
Cool. Well, I'm sure we'll be saying her name again. That's, I would imagine that takes a lot of gumption to do, because actually we've seen a lot of headlines about people being denied their diplomas for actions they've taken during the graduation ceremony. There's been a couple
Right.
instances where somebody had a flag, like a Mexican flag was one, and they denied him his diploma, and they ended up giving it back to him. And the fortunate thing is, and there's been people who have their hair a certain way or dreadlocks or whatever, and they'll try to deny them. I mean, anything. It's just so silly. I mean, these people already did the work. They're leaving, going into the real world where nobody's going to criticize you for your hair. There may be other whatever consequences, but you deal with that. And just trying to deny these young people their autonomy is, in one way or another, is just an awful thing. but we see that these viral sort of clips and awareness of these issues really make a difference. And so it's good to see that young people realize that their presence and their voices really matter. And you mentioned Bella, who's on our team. She's like our resident TikToker.
Mhm.
And so she has that voice and that,
I just got a notice that one of her reels on Instagram, she just put it up like an hour ago and it already has like 500 views. It's just very crazy.
yeah, yeah. I mean, and it's so good that we can, we can tap into that. And so I love, what you do on your podcast to try to make things more culturally relevant. I think that's super important, especially for the younger crowd, that there's a cultural aspect to politics. It matters. It affects your life. And the more I think we can make that connection for people, the more they will see how politics affects their daily life and they really need to be involved in it. And so obviously that's a really good thing. Would love to end on just that really positive note, but I would be remiss not to mention a story that came across my Twitter feed that I think we are going to end up doing our own story on the Texas Signal. But I just want to read this tweet just to give people an idea of what's actually going on and sort of an update with the grid and the power, grid that the storm and the fallout from that. Basically, we know that there were a lot of companies that made a ton of money off the pain and suffering of a lot of people during that 2 week period. And so this comes from a report from Jay Root, who's a Houston Chronicle reporter, very well respected. He tweets that Energy Transfer, which is the name of the company, controlled by billionaire Kelsey Warren, a huge donor to Greg Abbott, scored $2.4 billion off the storm that caused the blackouts. And then he follows that up by saying the big winner, Energy Transfer, um, they have former Governor Rick Perry as a board member. And so these folks, they do what they can to remove regulations and restrictions while they're in government so that the moment they step out of government, they can cash in, go join one of these boards, rake in the tons and tons of cash that they set these companies up for. And guess who gets the bill? The taxpayers.
Yeah.
And
Kelsey Warren and Energy Transfer, also for folks that don't know, this is the company that has the Dakota Access Pipeline. Yes, he was actually one of Donald Trump's largest donors as well. I think like a top 10 caliber. So I think I actually mentioned him a few weeks ago. He was one of the people I would be actually looking to see who he if he would pick anybody in the Paxton Bush race. But yes, and I do have to kind of regret to inform people that if you do visit Dallas and you go to Clyde Warren Park, this is where that comes
that's the
from.
Warren. Okay.
That's the Warren.
The Warren and Clyde Warren. It is a cool park. Sometimes, we end up celebrating the wrong people for great things, but that was a privately funded thing, I believe, right? Right.
I believe
Or
so.
at least mostly privately funded.
I mean, it is, I think, a concept where you take a place where you don't think would actually make sense for a park and actually turn it into something really, really nice. We should see more of that.
I agree. If we could convince very conservative billionaires to spend more money on public parks and less on funding Donald Trump and Abbott, I would praise them all day long. I would love that. That would be
better use of their funds.
Much better for everybody. So, well, that's all I got. I don't know if you have any parting words, but I think that's a full agenda.
Good luck to everyone. If you have a chance to go see Beto, have fun. Bring sunscreen and some water. That's all I would say.
Yeah, absolutely. That sounds great. And make sure that you become a deputy voter registrar in whatever your county is, so that if you do come across someone and you talk to them and you find out they're actually pretty progressive, then you register them to vote. So we can do what we need to do to make this state a better place for everybody. And of course, everybody listening, we really appreciate your time. We really appreciate you joining us and following us at texassignal.com and of course on Twitter and Instagram and TikTok. and we'll continue to bring you the progressive side of things in Texas. And a special shout out to our Patreons who contribute monthly to make sure that we can do this progressive journalism. If you're interested in that, just go to texassignal.com and you'll see at the very top on the right how to join and become one of our Patreon members. So with that, we will talk to you next week. Later.
Okay.